Welcome to RevOps Revolution, where we focus on changing the game for driving revenue. I'm your host, Jesse Morris, and each episode we take a look at the different areas that affect change and drive revenue across your organization. If this is your first time joining us, please subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episode. Here's to the revolution. Welcome to another day of the revolution. I am your host, Jesse Morris, and today we are lucky to have one of my former colleagues, friends, and marketing leader, Lindsay Mahoney. Lindsay, thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me, Jesse. I'm so excited to be here.
Stoked to have you on. So it's fun. Lindsay and I worked together at our last company. Really excited to have you on the show today. We've been trying to get some time together. I think one of the cool things that I always think about with you and I, like how, and you'll talk probably a little bit about today, like how our relationship built over time. And I think you're one of the best marketing leaders I've ever worked with. And I think one of the cool things about that is just a few things that you did. One, it's this idea that like we partnered together, which is very unique. And I think it wasn't just us. I think we talked about this, like even with finance and, sales and all the other aspects as well. And then I think this idea too, like you've been leading teams for over 15 years now, which I think goes a long way. You've seen a lot of different things. We were talking about that earlier. And I think one of the things that always stood out to me too is how you build your cultures. And I think very similar, you and I have kind of similar leadership styles and how we do that. And I always admire that. So really excited to have you on. Can you share a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks again for having me, and thanks for the nice words. I really appreciate it. So I'm Lindsay Mahoney. I am a North American marketing leader for MRI Software. We are headquartered out of Cleveland, Ohio, and I'm actually out of the Atlanta office. I've been here, it'll be actually a year next month in July. And before that, I've always really been in tech. Actually, at the very beginning of my career, I started as an intern in PR and healthcare. And I was going to stay there. I loved it. And then there was no job, but there was a job in tech. And so I took that one, and really the rest is history. And I mean, man, what an awesome time to be in tech. What an awesome time to be a marketer in tech. The technology we get to use and the technology we get to market is it's just awesome right now. So I started my career really focusing on the demand component, but have really now kind of do the whole thing inclusive of product marketing and content marketing and demand and events and all of the different pieces. But I think my favorite part is really the intersection of where marketing connects with sales and sales ops and how those pieces come together. And actually at my current role, we kind of define that team as the go-to-market team. So that's a mix of ops, solutions, marketing, and then of course sales. So that's where I'm going now, and just really am loving it and having a lot of fun with it.
Not surprised at all. I mean, I think the thing that always stands out is you're similar to me where we just love what we do. And that makes a huge difference. When you think about like your career and you think back on some of the things that have led you to today, we were talking before this a little bit about, the different experiences you've had, and you've seen a lot of different things. Like, what do you think has driven your success? I mean, are there some core things you always come back to?
Yeah, no, for sure. So, I mean, if I look back to the beginning, I think one of the pieces of success that was really probably the biggest influential piece that was driving me is I didn't want to have to go home. And so I moved to Atlanta right from school. I'm originally from the Maryland, DC area, and I didn't want to have to go home. And I only had a certain amount of money to keep me in Atlanta. And once that was gone, I was in trouble. And that happened 21 years ago at this point. So that drive was what really kind of started my career. But I realized when I looked at where I saw people be successful, it was the people that were always learning. Every day I try and learn something, even if it's about myself, about someone else, if it's a new skill, but every day I'm always learning. And so I think that that's one of the big pieces, just to always focus on learning. And then this one is a hard one, and it's taken a long time to get to this point, but like, you got to always be listening more than you're speaking, and really listening to hear people that you admire, how they're positioning things, how they're solving problems, the people that are building the products that you're marketing. I mean, you've got to know your stuff. If you don't know your stuff, it's really hard to market. And then I think in addition to listening and learning, it's just leaning into opportunities, identifying new opportunities, raising your hand, having your voice be heard, and just not sitting in the back and letting kind of life pass you by, for a better way to put it. And then, at the end of the day, it's also a little bit of luck too, being in the right place at the right time, but having the right attitude to really capitalize on an opportunity.
I think those are really good, and I mean, the acknowledgement of luck. It's also being in the position to be able to
Yep.
take advantage of the luck, right? Which has
Yep.
always been a thing.
Absolutely.
I want to double click a little bit on leaning in, and I'm going to put you on the
Yeah.
spot a little bit here. Can you talk about a time in your career, maybe even early on, where like you felt like you leaned in and it really paid off in a big way, and you took maybe a risk or something around those lines?
Yeah, early on in my career, I was working for a startup where we were kind of the belle of the ball for a little bit. And there was a lot of transition in marketing leadership. And the CEO liked me. He thought I was smart. He asked me for my opinions. And I was probably 26, 27, so very, very early on in my career. But he asked me for my opinions. And at first, I was cautious to share them. And then he kept asking. And so then I started sharing them more. And then when we had some transition in the leadership, I went to his office and said, "Give me a chance. Let me try and do it." Was I doing it the way the CMO was? Of course. Like, was it anywhere close to that? No. But what I learned by leaning into that opportunity truly transformed my career. It made me so much more relevant. I was exposed to things that I most people my age weren't exposed to. And I would go home and I would, call people that I admired and say, "This is what happened today. What's your advice?" And so I think that's probably an opportunity where you just leaned in. I saw, and I've leaned in before and was told no. So it doesn't mean just because you're told you lean in and you ask for something and you don't get it, that you're never going to. It's leaning in every time, and sometimes it's going to work and sometimes it's not. But that's probably something that comes to mind is when I worked at MFG. That was a big lean in opportunity that really did shape the next 10 years of my career.
It's really cool, and I think the unique thing about that too is, again, A, you put yourself in that position because you built trust over time, but then B, when that opportunity came, to your point around luck, you went after it and
Yeah.
ultimately were able to pull it off, right? At the end of the
Yeah.
day. So
Fingers crossed.
when
Yeah.
you think about the leadership side, because I think this is something that you and I both have talked about in the past, and we often think about, like, how do you feel like you encourage your team to lean in more? Like, what are some of the things you're doing? And again, I'm kind of putting you on the spot with this one,
Yeah.
that you feel like that is helping drive some of that own behavior, and I think part of that's innately. I think partly some people have
Yeah.
that innately. You probably agree with that, but I also think part of it is we can encourage that or bring that out of people. What are some things you're doing or thinking around those lines?
I push people to solve things themselves. And I think one of the things that has really changed in my own leadership over time is that different isn't wrong. And so just because I would solve something a specific way and someone presents a different opportunity to solve it, it doesn't mean it's wrong. And so I really push my team, the people I work with, the people that I partner with, my peers to say, okay, tell me how you wanna fix it. Tell me what you wanna do with it, and then let's talk about that. And I think that that level of empowerment goes a long way. I think also from a leadership perspective, having to be okay not being the one that knows the answer, but your team knows the answer, and you realize that that's actually more empowering than anything, is giving them that voice instead of you always being the voice. So I hope that answers the question, but I think that's kind of where I really focus is on empowering people, letting them drive, and if they need my help, I come along the way. But I mean, the team I'm working with now, we have come so far in the past 6 months, and it's by them being in the steering wheel, taking it, and just running, and the results have just been amazing.
It's interesting when you look at it, because I think both of our personalities are kind of doers. Let's execute. Let's
Yeah.
get this thing done. And a shift for me, very similar to what you were just talking about, is like, my natural right off the bat thing is always like, if I get asked a question, I'm going to want to answer that question.
Mhm.
And now it's almost the, okay, take a deep breath, and then it's exactly what you said. It's like pushing it back and going, hey, what do you think? Like,
Yep.
before I answer you, and I was on a team meeting this week, and right away I was like, "Oh, I got the answer," and I'm like, "Wait a second,
Yeah.
like that's not the purpose of this whole thing, anyways. The whole purpose is
Yep.
to get them thinking." And so it's been fun to, like, even as a leader, to evolve, and sometimes I
Yeah.
have a hard time with it because I do love having the answer. Like, we all feel good about that. You're
Love
like, it's
it.
like you get that self satisfaction of winning, but it also is a reframing from a leadership
Yep.
perspective of, like, winning no longer is actually you and I having the answer. It's seeing our
Yep.
teams, right, fully fulfill their own capabilities, which is cool.
And I like to think that 85% of the time I've got the right mindset. 15% of the time, man, I still want that answer. You know, and I want to give it, and I want to have my hands on the button that's making it work. And so I think it's finding that balance too, is when do you need to push the button? And when do you need to step back and be a supporter to those that are pushing the button?
Yeah, completely agree. Okay, I want to shift gears a little bit here. And one of my favorite topics, and something that you and I have spent some time on, is really about, I would say, kind of the dynamics and tension across different departments and really go to market.
Yeah.
Because I think it's something that a lot of companies struggle. I mean, almost every company I've been into, there is tension either between sales and marketing or
Yeah.
RevOps and finance or whatever parts of the business. And I think like one of the cool things, I was actually talking to Sue the other day about this, and like tension isn't always bad, right? Like there's
Nope.
actually good tension and bad tension. Like how do you think about it? There are places where you actually think it's productive and others where you're trying to smooth things out. Any examples you can give around that?
Yeah, I think that the like you said, tension is not necessarily bad. I do think the tension often comes from everyone needing to lead. And I think there have to be times when marketing is leading, there's times when sales should be leading, there's times when solutions should be leading, sales ops should be leading. And when you have partners that understand that, that's where I think the relationship is really strong. When I actually started 2 companies ago, I came in and I was talking to someone in the marketing org, and they were like, "We don't work for sales." And I was like, "Oh, ooh, I do. I absolutely work for sales, because if sales is successful, the company is successful."
Mhm.
Working for someone doesn't mean you become an order taker or you lose your sense of direction or you have no input on strategy. Working for sales means you understand that revenue and bookings is what drives the organization. And so I think being able to be a leader that's okay with that, um, comes a really long way. And having partners that feel the same way, our number one metric is pipeline creation. And so if I'm building all of the pipeline in the world and we're missing bookings targets, that's not ideal. If we're not building pipeline and we're hitting bookings targets, still not ideal. So it's just really understanding that balance and that shuffle. Like, we're all in it for the same goal, even if we have individual goals.
I think that's a good call out. When you think about that piece of it, like what has been something you've seen around those lines to help get that alignment? Because I think it's easy. It's easy to be like, you know,
Yeah.
hey, I work for sales, but that's a shift for, and I think mindset, especially for people maybe who haven't always thought that way. What are
Yep.
some of the things that you've either done or you've seen can work to help people get in that? Because again, it's like we all
Yeah.
have a little bit different objectives, but we should have the same central objective, right?
Absolutely. So I think a lot of it is building trust, and building trust is one of those things that, like, you say, and it's like, you got to build trust. I mean, how do you do that? I had Gary Brooks, who I absolutely adore. He's a marketing leader that I worked with at Synchron. He always talked about, you have to build up your chips. Like, you want to go to the table and you want someone to gamble on your idea, to spend their time with you. You have to have built chips with them. So it's maybe building that trust by doing some things that maybe you don't think are super strategic, but your partner seems to think that they are, and just kind of working on that relationship and say, I'm going to go here. So then when I need an ask, maybe you can come help me. And so, like, I'm really big on building that, your chips, building your bank, and having people see you as valuable. I also think it's about honesty too. And if you get off to the wrong foot, just being honest. I mean, you and I had a very we had a little bit of a tense relationship when we started, and now things have come the wrong way. And I mean, I actually learned so much from you. You sat me down and I had one of the most awkward conversations. Jesse literally looked me in the face and said, "You're my headwind. Why?" And I was like, that's not true. No, no, that's not." And I went to just save face. And then finally we ended up having an amazing conversation, and we both wanted the same things. And I was fearful that you were trying to move my cheese, and you were, but my cheese needed to be moved. So I think being able to be aware enough to also be that vulnerable and say, "Oh man, maybe I got this off to a wrong start." And that's tough, but that's how you build the relationship. That's how you build the trust. And without that, the marketing, sales, who gets credit, who doesn't, it's never going to work. It just isn't. You have to be willing to be vulnerable and honest in order to get there. So
It's
thank you.
amazing. Like I think back on that time, and you and I've talked
Yeah.
about this before. Like
Yeah.
it's actually a very pivotal moment, even in my career, because it I think it a affirmed some things, and b I also think it was an encouragement of like
Yeah.
when it seems like I don't want to say all things are lost. That sounds like all hope is lost. It sounds like really dire.
Yeah.
But I was at a point like at that point like I don't know if I can keep doing this. And I
Yeah.
remember vividly like there was a lot of tension. And what's crazy is how quickly it shifted. Right? Like we
Yes.
had the most awkward conversation. I
Yep.
was not excited about that. I was willing to do it. We
No.
were willing to have that hard conversation.
Yep.
And then to your point, like it was just like this instant like exhale, I feel like. And then it was
Yeah.
okay, we have established which direction we want to
Yeah.
row. We both acknowledge we can row pretty powerful together
Yep.
and let's do it, right? And I think that
Yep.
just it is funny because like so many points since that point even
Yeah.
I've been presented with this option of like, do I have hard conversations? Do I lean in? It's back to your
Yep.
leaning in thing. Do I lean in here?
Yeah.
And your natural inclination is like, oh, I don't really want to put myself in that
Yeah.
vulnerable position. And it's so cool when you do, and it's just amazing
Yeah.
at how quickly something that you feel like is like done for, over, not
Yep.
possible, and it just all of a sudden just completely dispelled, and then actually it was like it literally just feels like the wind shifted, and it was just a powerful
Yeah.
force the other direction.
And it's being able to realize that being vulnerable actually makes you a stronger leader, and it's okay to be wrong. Sorry goes a long way. Maybe you came off the wrong way to someone, which I know I absolutely have before. To just say, oh gosh, that wasn't my intention. I'm so sorry. That goes a long way. And I think it builds that trust, it builds that partnership, but more importantly, it allows you to build something great together versus trying to build two empires side by side. So like the really I'm very fortunate with the team I've got now. Really all the teams I've worked with have always had incredible partnership, but it starts with making sure we want to be partners and we're working towards the same goal.
And I think back to your leaning in, I love that analogy because it is that willingness to go there sometimes, even when you don't feel like it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Super
no,
powerful.
and you think about it, like, you do that in your personal life.
Hmm.
I mean, if me and my husband are in an argument, I'm not just gonna, like I'm gonna lean in and say, "Gosh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that." It should translate to work, it should translate throughout all of our life. It's okay to be sorry, it's okay to make a mistake, and it's okay to forgive people too, and take a minute to get back on track, like, have a little bit of state of the union and get things back moving.
Well, and I also think like even when I think back to that conversation, like it wasn't one sided either. It was like, hey, here's the perspective that I'm coming from,
Yeah,
and also an acknowledgement of like, I don't know if my perspective is right, and you're kind of approaching it the same way. So I
yeah,
think it's like how you do that conversation too. It's not like,
yeah,
well, I'm right, you're wrong. It's the reality of like to your point, all relationships like there is this
yeah,
acknowledgement that like maybe I just don't see the whole thing, or maybe I'm only looking at it from my
yeah,
limited viewpoint. And I think that willingness to that acknowledgement, and back to your
yeah,
learning thing, like that is where I think teachability. When we think about like people we want to work with, both as
yep,
peers, but also like people we're leading, like that teachability piece, and it just goes such a long way. And it's the
yep.
acknowledgement of my limitation and perspective.
Yeah, 100%. 100 and I yep, and you can never stop. Never stop learning, never stop leaning in, across the board, personal and professional.
Yeah, there's
So,
this idea of like I've arrived. I don't think that I don't know where that if I'll ever get to that point. Probably not. I would hope not.
no, no,
Right? Hope not.
no,
That would
not at
get
all.
boring. I want to
No,
shift gears
agreed.
a little bit. Like, let's talk.
Yeah,
I think one of the things that you're phenomenal at as a leader in marketing, in particular, is you actually use data. Which I
love
say
data.
that, and like, I think a lot of people
Yeah,
who listen to this would actually acknowledge that sometimes, and I think that's on both sales and marketing. It's not just a marketing
yeah,
thing. But I would say it's actually less common that people genuinely use data. You have a lot of people that talk about it, but very few do. I think you've done a great job at doing it. I think that's why we actually had a really great partnership. Where, like, talk to me a little bit about, what things are you looking at? How are you deciding you're spending your marketing dollars? Like, what metrics are you running things off of?
yeah. No, for sure. So, uh, pipeline to in my world, actually in my last 3 orgs, pipeline is really king. And I think from a marketing perspective, if you are measuring things the business does not report on, you have to wonder what you're measuring. So I've worked for orgs and, they're like, well, we had a million MQLs. Neat. what does that mean? And it doesn't mean it's a clean metric. Do I think pipeline is the cleanest metric? I don't. It's a tough one, but it's a valuable metric.
And it's
And
unifying.
so, yes, it's unifying. It's something that sales and marketing jointly have a responsibility with. I was actually talking to one of our sales guys this week, and we were at an event, and he said that he had two really great conversations with prospects. And I was like, that's awesome. I said, will you do me a favor when we make sure, send me the information. I'll make sure to tag him with the campaign. He was like, well, I was talking to him before I came here. And I said, okay, that's fair. And he's like, I mean, I've been talking to him for 2 years. And I was like, okay, no, that's really fine. He said, when I ask you to give it to me, I'm not trying to take credit for it. That's not the goal. The goal is to say, over the course of this buyer's journey, all of these things happened. And I think that's like where marketing ROI results is kind of shifting to. You still have to have that metric that's the king, right? But then there's this story underneath it of all of the things that are happening. And that is where I think it's starting to really shift. Gartner put out this thing that basically said, like, I don't know how many years ago, X number of years ago, like buyers used to come in, they'd identify a problem, right? They'd go look for solutions, and then they'd build their requirements, and then they'd select something. And now, like it's this wild graphic, but now basically like 100 other touch points come in, and those are the things that are happening during the buying process. People are entering, you're doing more research on the front end, you're attending a webinar, you're reading an analyst report, you're watching a podcast, you're listening to peers, you're attending an industry event. Like all of these things are happening. There's so many different touch points before anything happens, that how do you really know what's working and what's not? And so there's this, the other stat I think was that 70% of the buying process has occurred before they ever reach out to a vendor. So when you do something like Sixth Sense, or when you do something like a trade show, you may not have a direct conversion there, but those pieces all have value. And then you get the question from finance or from leadership or from yourself or from your team that says, you had a webinar. What deals closed from that webinar? And I hate saying that's a really tough thing to answer, but it's a really tough thing to answer. And so I think for having a metric like pipeline, are we going in the right direction here? Okay, cool. And then you can look at like, and all of these channels influence that pipeline. Okay, cool. And we're going to try these new things. And sometimes the new things that you try might not actually have the desired outcome, but they start impacting and making your other channels more valuable. I remember at OnSolve, we used to do a lot with third party like affiliates. So advertising in different magazines, and we cut all of the spend because we didn't have direct conversions from it. But what we saw is our paid traffic and our organic traffic dropped significantly. And so trying to make correlations where you can, but understanding that you do have to show a metric. You do have to say, this is what we think we're going to do for this year. We're going to build $100 million in pipeline. And this is what I think we can do and how much money it will take us. I can't tell you exactly what every dollar did. I'll try, but the buying process is more complex than it ever been. And then you think about the number of people in it too. You got to have a metric. You got to use as much data as you can, but you also have to understand a lot of it's just happening on the back end, and you may or may not be able to track it back.
I think you have a lot of great points in there. I want to highlight a few of them, and we've spent a lot of time on this, right? Like you've got the what I call lead source attribution, which is your ROI
Yep.
metric, right? It's really like who gets the first credit for the gets the
Yep.
full credit, and that's never clean. And I think
No,
you see a lot of companies wanting that to just be perfect, and the
it's
reality is on
not.
both sides of it, like original source versus most recent source, and
Yep.
that whole discussion. We could literally spend an entire podcast episode on that
Yep.
alone. And the reality is there's value in measuring. So that's the last thing,
Yep.
as somebody who loves data. But there is, and I think this is the tricky thing with marketing, and one of the reasons why you're actually one of the first people I think that really pushed me so much into the pipeline focus, away from, I always had pipeline as a metric
Yeah.
versus kind of the central one. And I really appreciated it because it kind of opened my eyes, exactly, you said, one, to the unifying piece of it. But
Yeah.
then two, again, it's this like overarching theme of like, well, we're never going to get attribution perfect. It's just not possible. Like
Nope.
with the way data is, and even if data was perfect, still you're going to have exactly what your person you gave the example for has, right? Which is, hey, marketing did a reach out campaign, and I, as the AE, picked up the phone and did a cold call, and
Yeah.
both of those added value. And so it's like this idea of like, well, who should get more value? Well, I talked for 10 minutes and 15 seconds, and
Yep.
marketing's like, well, they rewatched the video 15 times. Like, where do you define and draw that line? And I think what I love about what you're saying is like, hey, look, we still need to hold some accountability. It's just the nature of business.
Absolutely.
You've got
Yep.
to do that. But we also want to understand more holistically of what things had an impact. And
Yep.
also, guess what? Some things don't ever have an impact. Great. We tried it, we learned, we
Yep.
moved on, we moved off of that. And I think that's where a lot of the power, I think where you do a great job leading, and also the partnership I think you and I have, but I think where a lot of people struggle is wrapping their heads around kind of being able to hold both of those
Yep.
things, right?
And one metric we've actually started just leveraging in the last 6 to 8 weeks is actually customer ARR impacted. So if we're at an event and we
Hmm.
have 15 customers come by the booth, and each of those customers have $1 million in business, we would have $15 million in ARR impacted by event A. That's with, everybody knows it's more costly to keep a customer than to get a new customer. And so we're starting to show that impact too, especially when you're a big player in the market and your customers are everywhere, or one of your big plays is cross-seller expansion, that becomes a piece that we're starting to track. So when we do our client conference, like what is our ARR goal to be at the conference? When we go to a trade show, we have a net new goal, right? But then also like how many clients do we want to make sure we're engaging with? So that's a new one that I'm playing around with. I'll keep you posted on how
So
it
I'm going to
goes.
repeat back because I've never heard
Yeah,
this one before. So I just want to make
it's
sure I
new.
understand this.
Yeah.
So it's literally not what did the customers do after the trade show and
Yep.
upsells. It has nothing to do with that. It's just like, hey, we engaged with face to face
Mhm.
15 customers, and we look at essentially what their total, TCV is,
Yep.
or AR, whatever we look at
Yep.
for each one of those customers. We sum that up, and that is our, what was the metric you called it?
Now I'm blanking. Client customer ARR. Customer
Customer
ARR.
AR
Yep.
impacted,
Client
right?
and client ARR impacted.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
And
that's how
so
you measure it. Did I get that right?
yep, and
Okay.
basically it's your roll up of what their contracts are worth. And
Yeah.
so
And
I
you're
think
really, again,
about
you're just communicating like the value of having face to face time, another
yeah.
touch point, getting
And
in
the
front of this
value
customer.
that marketing plays, that sales plays, that everybody plays in customer retention as well.
Yep.
Like we're so focused on new, and new
Mhm.
is so important. Like we as marketers, not necessarily in my current role, but like new is so important. Current is also really important. And so I actually think back to OnSolve sometimes and I'm like, that was a view that I think we missed a lot of the time. The impact of the events, the impact of webinars on current clients and the
Mhm.
value that it provided to them. So I'll keep you posted, but like we just started doing it, like I said, about 6 weeks ago, and it started to be a really interesting conversation. And so I think there is something to that, and then also pipeline, which pipeline can be inclusive of customer
Sure.
pipeline and new customer pipeline, but there is that like retaining piece that's so important that marketing and sales play such a huge role that is tough to talk about. So we're trying that, so we'll see.
I like it. I've never even heard of it, but I'm actually now I'm making a note because I'm
Well, and
totally
you know how
eating
I
out of
came
this stuff.
across it is I I saw a field in Salesforce and I was like, "I wonder if I sum that, what that looks like." And I
Hmm.
just kinda started playing around. I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's the total of all the contracts that were in this campaign. That's interesting," you know?
Hmm.
And so, yeah, no,
So
I'll
this was
let
something you came up. You hadn't heard about this. You just like literally came across this
no, I
metric and were
it
like,
was a
let's start
field
measuring.
in Salesforce, like, I'm still getting used to the new Salesforce instance, and I hadn't seen it rolled up like that
Yeah.
before. And so it's interesting because we started doing some road shows and things like that, and it's like, what does that mean?
Hmm.
Because it's the goal is to get and talk with our clients, but then how do we talk about it in a number that's important to people? So it's
Well,
interesting.
and yeah, it's interesting. And again, I think the biggest challenge with trade shows, that a lot of companies have is like, well, we didn't get a deal, or we only got two deals out of this. We needed to get
Yeah.
10. And so therefore we're not going to do it anymore. And this enriches the conversation to be like,
Yep.
hey, hold on. Like, let's think
Yep.
about this. Our biggest customers were there. They
Yes.
saw we were there. Like that
Yep.
also has to count for something as well.
And so now in like our goals sheet, we have like a what's your pipeline goal, what's your bookings goal, and those have like a 6 to 9 month lead time, right? But
Hmm.
then what's your customer or client impacted AR? So it was a good conversation. It's a great conversation, starting to look at it from a different way.
All right, I'll trademark it with Lindsay Mahoney when I bring it here. So
Yes,
I
I
love
love
it.
it. I love it.
So okay, I want to shift gears a little bit. I think
Yeah.
marketing always has had, and I think we've kind of covered some of the things, but there's always this black box component a little bit to marketing. Sales, I always feel like is
Yeah.
a little bit, it's just more quantifiable. It's just like
Yep.
one plus
100%.
one equals two, right? Marketing, exactly some of the things we talked about. And I think sometimes there's validity and concerns around a business of like, because of that black box. And part of the job, I think, of a marketing leader is to try to dispel some of that. And we've talked about some
Yep.
of these today. But I also think there's a responsibility on leaders outside of marketing to better understand marketing.
Mhm.
So, can you talk a little bit about what are some of the things that you wish the go to market team really understood about marketing and what they do, and any big misconceptions surrounding it?
I think one of the big pieces is that, like, the buying landscape is changing all the time, and I talked about it a little bit earlier, but, like, it is not as linear as it used to be. When I built my first SDR team, gosh, at this point, it was probably 2010, 2011, maybe 2012, I don't know, but a long time ago. It was so different. I read that book, Predictable Revenue, which is like the start of all of it, and it basically says, "Put in 100 calls and you get 15 meetings out."
Mhm.
Like, that was awesome. You know, like, that part was awesome because it was so easy. It's so different now. You have tools like SalesLoft and 6 Sense that's tracking intent, and then you have things like, I don't even know if it's called Copilot anymore, what Copilot and Wingman and all of those solutions
Yeah,
that we used to use, like, there's so many tools that you can use that we're hitting all of these prospects, we're hitting all these buyers, so is everybody else.
yep.
And so it's just different than it ever was before. And so I think for the go to market team to understand, especially when you have reps that are very seasoned and have been in the same work for a long time, that the 50 leads you maybe used to get or 50 ops you used to get every May, that's different. It's harder now. Things have changed. But hopefully, with all of the marketing activities that we're putting in the market, they're coming to us in different ways. Maybe they're not coming through forms anymore. Maybe they're coming through chat. Maybe they're coming direct to us from LinkedIn. Maybe they're picking up the phone. Maybe they're placing an order online. Like, it's just different, but it does really mean as marketers, we have to continue to work with our team. We have to make sure at GKOs and things, we're talking about the shift in landscape, but we're also saying these are all the things we're doing to stay in front of customers and prospects. Um, but just it's changing. It's changing every day. I think how marketers are using AI now compared to how we were using it 6 months ago, like that's going to continue to shift and change. And so the landscape makes clear cut attribution, clear cut consistent results a lot harder than they've ever been before.
And it's noisier, right? Like it's like
So
you got
noisy.
so much automation now that
So much
it's so
automation.
noisy.
So yes, it's noisy. I mean, I usually try and take SDR calls when they come because I think it's good karma.
Yep, I'm the same
And I
way.
get so many I can't anymore. I've gotten 3 sitting chatting in view
I
that
have
like
two. Yeah,
it's just there's so much, but you gotta break through that noise, and there is a way to do it.
there
There's a
is.
way to do it, and you think about the messages that you as a buyer actually respond to, it's back to basics. It's like heavy personalization and hitting a pain point. At previous works, we used to always say, like, you gotta make people feel fiscally irresponsible for not taking the call. It's like how you gotta figure out what that tick is with somebody in order to do that.
It's interesting. So along both of those lines, like I try to take two SDR calls a month. That's my goal. And partly
Yeah,
just because I want to see, part of my job in RevOps is to understand our whole sales motions and see what's
yeah,
working well and bring that to the rest of the company. And then also just because I buy the most software in the company. So I'm like
yeah,
literally the buyer of, and
yeah,
you and I both work for software companies. So like I am the target buyer in a lot of
yeah,
ways for what they do. And it's interesting because you're right. Like the SDR calls, and now
yeah.
that I say that, I don't think I've taken an SDR call in 2 months because I've been so busy. Before that, I was pretty good about it, and I would say like it was probably a batting average of 50% of the time they would actually land a meeting with me.
Yeah,
Um, where I actually, and this is a tidbit for anybody listening, where I would say have the highest conversion rate is LinkedIn messaging.
I agree.
I have a compelling message that, because I read everything
Yep,
in my email. It's like
yep,
I'm actually better at my LinkedIn email. This is terrible than my inbox at work, right? Like, because
yep,
I get 150 emails a day, I get maybe one, two LinkedIn messages a day. So
yep,
a different scale and size. And the other thing that's interesting too is like of video, I've only had 2 people send me video messaging on LinkedIn in the last
Yep.
year, and I think I took a meeting with at least one, and at least the other one I responded to, which is also
Yep.
so I think to your point, there's a way to cut through the noise and still be, still be unique. I think even with
Yep.
all this automation and AI and all the other things that you and I geek out over, there's still that capability.
And I think video with, captions.
Oh, yeah, with
I
definitely the captions.
never listen to it,
No,
but I'll read it.
no, read it.
I'll watch the video, but, like, so it's all of those little pieces. So it's just it's changing so fast. It's changing so fast, but in the same breath, it's what makes it exciting. I mean, if it was the same, we'd all be bored, right?
So one of the things that I just thought of, and one of the things that I had never seen done before, I'd heard of it, I never seen it done until you and I worked together, was putting SDRs under marketing. And I like at the time I remember being like, that's a sales function. And then I think is just again back to the pipeline being the center point metric. The more and more I would say came around to it, and I would say I'm
Yep.
actually a big believer in that approach. And talk to me a little bit of like, are you still doing that today? And what is just the impact you've seen by having that piece of it as well?
Yeah, no, I have actually, every org I've ever worked for, SDRs have been in marketing, and there is always, at some point in time in in my lifespan in each of those orgs, we say, "Should it report to sales?" And in most cases, every single one of the sales leaders have said, "We don't need that. We've got such a great partnership." And so, I mean, the last company you and I worked together before, I mean, we had a great relationship with chief growth officer, chief revenue officer before that, and they believed that keeping the SDRs in marketing kept them truly focused on prospecting versus focused on sales activities, completing accounts, finding contacts, and things that maybe became more of like a sales admin. Um, Once again, as long as you have that partnership, as long as you have that transparency for sales, having them report to marketing actually, in my opinion, is cleaner and ensures that they're measured properly, that they're focused on pure production, and they're focused on introducing and creating ops, not necessarily helping to close deals. I think you can get in trouble when they roll into sales too because they're booking fourth, fifth, sixth meetings. They're doing a lot more hand holding, and maybe for the type of sale that makes sense. But for me, I think having them in marketing keeps them very focused on. I mean, we always said pick and roll. I don't need you to sell the solution. I want you to demo the solution. I want you to set a meeting and then roll off and let the AE do what they do.
It's pretty cool because I was thinking the other day too, and it relates to this of just sometimes as well understanding what leaders and capabilities you have in an organization. So I think a lot about you and I, like, my current role, I have what I would say almost all of RevOps, other than enablement
Yeah.
still. Whereas when you and I worked together, you had marketing ops, and
Yep.
I remember part of that distinction we had was around like am I
Yeah.
coming for this? And I think I look back at that moment a lot, and I think it's pretty cool because I think my take as well as yours was like, hey, this is working well. Like, why would we
Yeah.
break this thing? Like, why would we move it? And I think it comes back
Yeah.
to like same thing around the SDR thing. It's like if you can make that work really effectively,
Yeah.
like why change it just because we have a strong opinion that this is how we've only. It
Yeah.
kind of comes back to what you and I talked about of like the more you see different things work, the back to
Yep.
perspective, your mind is open and you're like, you
Yep.
know what? There are so many other things in this company we've got to
Yeah.
fix. Why would we try to take something that is actually
Yeah.
working and then put more work into that when we've got
Yep.
17 other things we need to do down the
And
line?
it's the need, like, I don't need an empire. You don't need an empire. What I need is a functioning organization. I don't care if they report to me or not. And so focus on what is broken. If your SDR team is currently reporting to marketing and you believe it's broken, figure out what needs to be fixed.
Yep.
But if your SDR team is currently reporting to figure out what needs to be fixed, and if moving it to sales makes sense, that might make sense for the specific org.
Right.
For the ones I've always worked for, the marketing piece has always made a lot more sense. But they have to be laser focused on what you want them to do every day, what their goals are. They have to be compensated to support that. And I think marketing allows it to look a little bit differently than sales just because of the nature of the business. But I love it reporting to marketing. I think it's great. And we've had some really great success in past orgs with it. But I've also seen people that it rolls to sales and it's equally as successful. So I think you can do
That's
it either
awesome.
way.
Last question. What
Yeah.
are you energized about right now? Like when you look at potential within marketing, within SaaS,
Yeah.
within being a leader, like what is the thing that you're like thing or things that you're just like, man, this is getting me excited right now? What are those things?
I think a couple things. So I think I said it already, but it's the how fast tech is moving right now. Like, it's an exciting time to be here. I had an awesome conversation with SalesLoft the other day, and they were talking about some of the agents they're rolling out within SalesLoft. And I mean, it was a cool conversation. You look at agentic AI, you look at all of the different pieces of AI and how you can use them, how they can make you stronger and better as a marketing team. That's really exciting to me. I think it's funny if you think about, when you and I were prepping for this, it was kind of like, what's a campaign that you've thought is successful? And there are lots of campaigns I've thought that are successful. The evolution of what a campaign is exciting. It used to be send out a direct mail and people are going to book a meeting and you go to the meeting, you give them an iPad, and that was awesome. That used to be like something I talked about all the time. Like that seems so archaic now, And so I'm excited about how fast it's moving. I'm excited to stay. How much I have to push myself to stay up to speed. I'm one of those people that works best when they're overloaded. And so, like, that piece is really fun to me. I'm excited about the constant overlap between sales and marketing, the tech that we have to become more efficient and successful. There's a lot of movement, and that's fun. That's really fun to me.
On the leadership side, is there anything fun or unique you feel like you're doing in your org that would be helpful for other people? That you're like, hey, this is like something fun, like on Thursdays we do this, or is there anything at all that you think that you're like, hey, this is something that I've tried to implement that I've seen make a real impact across my org?
So I wish I had a really good answer there, but I'm not sure I do. I think one of the things I'm trying to do is to create absolute transparency every single quarter on how we're doing against our goals. So you remember 5x5 from it's McKinsey 5x5. It's basically five big goals with five little goals underneath. A lot of people hate it. I love it. I love it because it enables you to be laser focused on what you're doing. And so we set out at the beginning of the year, we said, we're going to do these 25 things and they're going to be focused on these five areas. And every single quarter, really with my leaders, we're doing monthly, we red, yellow, green them. And it keeps us like hyper honest, hyper focused. I think that level of transparency down all the way throughout the org really is helpful for people. And so, I don't know if anyone from my team will listen to this or not, but like, I hope please, if you do, tell me. But I think that creating transparency, creating opportunities for people to come up with ideas, I think that's been really helpful. I know at MRI as a whole, we do an annual hackathon. So that happens in November. I was so new when we did it last time that I'm excited to do that again. But it's taking ideas from the team, giving everybody a voice. I think that is probably something that's working, and also like letting my leaders lead. I walked in. We do a bell ringing every Thursday, which is basically like every office kind of gets together and like celebrates wins, and we have a bell in the office and you ring, and it's fun. And a bunch of folks from my group were in a conference room with their leader who's out of Ohio. And I like popped in. I was like, "We're doing the bell ringing. Can you guys come?" And he was like, "What are you doing in here? Why are you talking to my team?" Obviously joking, but it's fun. So like letting leaders lead, being transparent, like getting people excited, trying to get. I know it's taboo depending upon what you read, but trying to get as much face to face time with people as you can. Even if it's just a video, but actually being in rooms with folks, like we're really trying to increase that where we can. It just helps build everything. And I think it's helping people be more comfortable. And as a newer leader too, it's giving them, hopefully showing them that I'm a person and that I want to hear from everybody and all of those pieces. So I don't know if that 100% answers it, but I think
No, that
it's
was great.
working.
And actually, weirdly enough, I think something like the 5x5 seems simple. I bet
Love
you
the
very
5x5.
few do it. And I'm sitting here going, actually, I kind of like that idea because I'm having a challenge right now too of like, how do we keep focus? So I'm going to
Because
take
you
that one
can't,
back because
you can't stay
we
on
had
top.
that before, right? And it makes it
Yeah.
tough. So
It
I
was
really like it.
great, and we rolled out actually, this is another thing that we started doing is like a not we, me, is like a personal 5 by 5. What do I wanna do for my year? I wanna be a better mom, I wanna be a better spouse, I wanna learn this, I wanna read books, like, I've actually adopted it into my personal life just so it becomes something that I said this was important. I wanna work out 3 times a week, like, am I still doing that? And sometimes the answer is no, and that's okay.
Mhm.
But the 5 by 5 is a great way to center yourself. If you Google McKinsey 5 by 5, you'll find an awesome template. But yeah, that's been really helpful.
That's awesome. Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much for joining today. This has been a lot of
Thank
fun.
you. Yes, this is awesome. Thank you for having me. Come to Atlanta, or I'll come to Colorado. Like,
Yeah, most
like
definitely. And those of you listening, if you aren't following Lindsay on social, follow her on LinkedIn. Also, feel free to subscribe to the podcast. But thanks again for joining. Thanks for listening, and hope everybody has a great rest of the day.